The morning sun had not yet risen over the small village of Kara in Haryana when Priya Malik opened her eyes. She was already awake before her alarm could ring. Today was the day she had been waiting for since she was 12 years old. Today was the day of the state rifle shooting trials. Today was the day that would change everything. Priya was 22 years old. She had dark hair that she always tied back in a tight bun. Her hands were rough from years of farm work, but they were steady. Those steady hands were her greatest gift. When she held a rifle, something magical happened. The world became quiet. Her breathing became slow, and the target became the only thing that existed. She got up from her thin mattress on the floor and looked around the small room she shared with her two younger sisters. They were still sleeping. The walls were made of brick and had cracks running through them. The ceiling had patches of damp. But Priya did not see any of this. She only saw the future she was fighting for. Her father, Ramesh Malik, was already awake. He was sitting outside on a wooden chair drinking tea. He was a farmer who owned 3 acres of land. It was not much, but it was enough to feed his family. When he saw Priya coming out, his face broke into a smile. "Today is your day," he said. "I can feel it in my bones." Priya smiled back at him. Her father was the only person in her family who believed in her dream. Her mother thought shooting was not for girls. Her uncles said she was wasting time that should be spent learning to cook. The village women whispered that she was too ambitious for her own good. But her father had always stood by her. "Remember what I told you," her father said. "Keep your eyes on the target. Forget everything else. The world will try to shake you, but you must stand firm like a mountain." Priya nodded. She had heard these words 1,000 times. But today, they meant more than ever. The journey to the state sports complex took 4 hours by bus. Priya sat by the window and watched the fields pass by. She thought about how she had started shooting. It was an accident, really. When she was 12, a mobile shooting range had come to a fair near her village. Her father had paid 10 rupees for her to take 3 shots. She had hit the center all 3 times. The man running the range had stared at her like she was from another planet. After that day, Priya knew what she wanted to do with her life. But wanting something and getting it were 2 very different things in her world. Her family had no money for coaching or equipment. The nearest shooting range was 50 kilometers away, and nobody in her village had ever heard of a girl becoming a shooter. But Priya was stubborn. She saved every rupee she could. She worked in the fields after school. She sold vegetables at the market on weekends. And slowly, very slowly, she gathered enough money to buy an old air rifle from a shop in the city. It was rusty and dented, but it was hers. She practiced every day. She set up targets on the wall of an abandoned shed near her house. She shot until her shoulder was sore. She shot until her eyes burned. She shot until she could hit the center with her eyes half closed. 3 years ago, she had finally saved enough to join a proper shooting academy in the district town. The academy was run by a man named Coach Vikram Singh. He was a former national-level shooter who had won many medals in his youth. People said he was the best coach in the state. People also said he had strong opinions about who should and should not be a shooter. Priya remembered her first day at the academy. She had walked in wearing her simple clothes, carrying her old rifle. The other students were from wealthy families. They had expensive equipment and branded sports clothes. They looked at her like she was dirt on their shoes. Coach Vikram had looked at her for a long time. His eyes were cold and hard. Finally, he had asked, "Where are you from?" "Kara village," Priya had answered. "Village girl," he had said, almost to himself. "Do you know how much it costs to become a real shooter? Equipment, ammunition, travel, training camps. Can your family afford all this?" Priya had felt her face becoming hot with shame, but she had lifted her chin and looked him straight in the eye. "I will find a way," she had said. "I just need a chance to learn." something had flickered in Coach Vikram's eyes. Maybe it was surprise. Maybe it was amusement. He had let her join the academy, but he had never treated her like the other students. He gave her the worst equipment. He scheduled her practice sessions at odd hours. He criticized her constantly while praising others for the same shots. But Priya had endured. She had learned, and she had gotten better, much better. Now, 3 years later, she was going to the state trials. If she did well, she would be selected for the state team. She would get proper funding, proper equipment, proper recognition. Everything she had worked for was riding on today. The bus stopped at the sports complex. Priya got off and took a deep breath. The complex was huge. There were buildings for different sports, tracks for running, fields for football and hockey. And at the far end, there was the shooting range. Priya walked toward it with her bag on her shoulder. Inside the bag was her rifle, still the same old one she had bought all those years ago. She had taken care of it like it was her child. She had cleaned it, oiled it, repaired it whenever it broke. It was not fancy, but it was reliable. As she approached the range, she saw Coach Vikram standing near the entrance. He was talking to some officials. When he saw her, his expression changed. It was subtle, but Priya noticed it. There was something in his eyes that she had never seen before. It looked almost like worry. "Priya," he said, walking toward her, "you made it. Good." "Thank you, Coach," she said politely. He looked at her bag. "Is that your rifle?" "Yes, Coach." He shook his head. "That old thing will not do for the trials. The judges will think you are not serious." Priya felt a knot forming in her stomach. "But, Coach, it is the only one I have." Vikram smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. "Do not worry. I have arranged something for you. Come with me." He led her to a storage room at the back of the range. Inside, there were racks of rifles and boxes of equipment. Vikram reached for a rifle on one of the lower shelves. It was newer than Priya's rifle, with a polished stock and shiny metal parts. "Use this one," he said, handing it to her. "It is better for competition." Priya took the rifle and looked at it. Something felt wrong. The weight was different from what she was used to. The balance seemed off, but Coach Vikram was already walking away. "The trials start in 1 hour," he called over his shoulder. "Go and register." Priya stood there holding the rifle. She wanted to say something, but she did not know what. Coach Vikram had never done anything kind for her before. Why was he helping her now? She decided to test the rifle before the competition. She found an empty lane at the practice range and set up. She loaded the rifle, raised it to her shoulder, and looked through the sight. The first thing she noticed was that the sight was not aligned properly. It was tilted very slightly to the right. If she shot at the center, the bullet would go to the left. She frowned and tried to adjust it, but it seemed to be stuck. She took a shot anyway. The bullet went exactly where she had expected. It hit the target about 2 inches to the left of center. Priya lowered the rifle and examined it more closely. The trigger felt loose. The barrel had a tiny bend that was almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. This rifle was not better than her old one. It was worse, much worse. She understood now. Coach Vikram had not given her this rifle to help her. He had given it to her to make her fail. But why? What had she ever done to him? Priya thought about the past 3 years. She thought about how Vikram had always favored other students, how he had given special attention to Rohit, the son of a local politician. How he had helped Rohit get into competitions while ignoring her requests for the same opportunities. And then she understood. Rohit was also competing in today's trials. If Priya did well, she might beat him, and Coach Vikram could not allow that. His reputation, his connections, his future favors from Rohit's powerful father, all of it depended on Rohit's success. Priya felt anger rising in her chest. It was a hot, fierce anger that she had learned to control over the years. She wanted to go to Coach Vikram and throw the rifle at his feet. She wanted to shout at him in front of everyone. She wanted to expose his dishonesty. But she did not do any of these things. Instead, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She remembered her father's words. Keep your eyes on the target. Forget everything else. She had a choice to make. She could give up and go home. She could use her old rifle and hope for the best. Or she could use this faulty rifle and prove that she was better than any obstacle they put in her way. Priya opened her eyes. She knew what she was going to do. She would use this rifle. She would learn its flaws, and she would make those flaws disappear with her skill. The registration hall was crowded with shooters from all over the state. Priya signed her name and received her lane assignment. She was in lane 7. She noticed that Rohit was in lane 8, right next to her. Rohit was a tall young man with an arrogant smile. He was wearing expensive shooting clothes and carrying a rifle that probably cost more than Priya's family earned in a year. When he saw her, he smirked. "Village girl," he said. "Still trying?" Priya did not answer. She simply walked to her lane and began preparing. The next hour was the longest of her life. She did not use the practice shots that were allowed to competitors. Instead, she spent the time studying the rifle. She held it, felt its weight, understood its balance. She looked through the sight and calculated exactly how much it was off. She pulled the trigger gently to feel how loose it was. By the time the trials began, she knew this rifle as well as she knew her own. The first round was 10 shots at 10 meters. It was the easiest round, meant to warm up the shooters. Priya stepped up to the line and raised the rifle. Her heart was beating fast, but her hands were steady. She aimed at a spot 2 inches to the right of center, accounting for the faulty sight. She squeezed the trigger gently, accounting for its looseness. The rifle fired. The shot hit the center. A small murmur went through the crowd watching. Priya did not react. She simply prepared for her next shot. The second shot hit the center. So did the third. And the fourth. By the time she finished the first round, Priya had hit the center with all 10 shots. Her score was perfect. She lowered the rifle and looked toward Coach Vikram. He was standing at the side of the range with the other coaches. His face had gone pale. His mouth was hanging open slightly. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. Priya allowed herself a small smile. Then she turned back to face the targets. The second round was about to begin, and she was just getting started. The other competitors were staring at her now. Rohit's smirk had disappeared. He looked confused and angry. He had expected her to fail. Everyone had expected her to fail. But Priya Malik was not like everyone else. She was a girl from a small village who had learned to shoot in an abandoned shed. She had faced poverty, discrimination, and sabotage, and she had overcome all of it. Now she was going to show them what she was truly capable of. The judge called for the second round to begin. This round was 15 shots at 25 meters. The distance was greater, and the margin for error was smaller. Any flaw in the equipment would be magnified. But Priya was not worried. She had already calculated the adjustments she needed to make. She had mapped out every imperfection in the rifle and found a way to compensate for it. She stepped up to the line and raised the rifle once more. The range fell silent. Everyone was watching. And Priya Malik began to shoot. The sound of the first shot echoed through the range. Priya did not wait to see where it landed. She already knew. She felt it in her bones. The bullet had gone exactly where she wanted it to go. The electronic scoreboard confirmed it a second later. 10 points. Perfect center. She breathed out slowly and prepared for the next shot. Around her, she could hear the other competitors firing. Some shots were hitting well, others were going wide. But Priya blocked out all the noise. In her world, there was only the rifle, the target, and her own breathing. The second shot, 10 points. The third, 10 points. The fourth, 10 points. She was in what shooters call the zone. It was a state of perfect concentration where everything else faded away. Time seemed to slow down. Her body moved automatically, without conscious thought. Every muscle knew exactly what to do. By the time she finished the second round, Priya had scored another perfect set. 15 shots, 15 perfect scores. Her total was now 150 points out of 150 possible. The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were completely silent, watching her with wide eyes. This was not supposed to happen. A village girl with no connections, using equipment that nobody recognized, was beating everyone in the competition. Coach Vikram had moved closer to the range. His face was no longer pale. It was red with anger. He kept glancing at the rifle in Priya's hands, as if he could not believe what he was seeing. He knew better than anyone that the rifle was faulty. He had personally selected it for its defects. And yet, somehow, this girl was shooting perfect scores with it. Between rounds, Priya walked to the rest area to drink some water. Her hands were still steady, but she could feel tiredness creeping into her muscles. Shooting required intense concentration, and she had been holding that concentration for over an hour now. A young woman approached her. She was about Priya's age, with short hair and a friendly face. She was wearing the uniform of a local sports newspaper. "Excuse me," the woman said. "I am Meera Sharma from the Haryana Sports Times. Can I ask you a few questions?" Priya hesitated. She had never spoken to a reporter before. "I am in the middle of the competition," she said. "Just a quick question," Meera said. "Everyone is talking about you. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Priya thought about the abandoned shed behind her house. She thought about the countless hours of practice, the sore shoulders, the burning eyes. She thought about all the people who had told her she would never succeed. "I taught myself," she said simply. Meera's eyes widened. "Taught yourself? You had no coach?" "I had a coach for the past 3 years," Priya said. "But the real learning, the important learning, I did on my own." Before Meera could ask another question, the announcement came for the third round. Priya excused herself and walked back to the range. The third round was the most difficult. 20 shots at 50 meters. At this distance, even the smallest mistake would send the bullet off target. The wind became a factor. The shooter's heartbeat became a factor. Everything mattered. As Priya took her position, she noticed Rohit talking to Coach Vikram near the entrance. They were arguing about something. Rohit looked upset, and Vikram was trying to calm him down. Priya could not hear what they were saying, but she could guess. Rohit was not doing as well as expected. His shots had been good but not perfect. He was falling behind, and he was blaming someone for it. Priya turned away from them and faced her target. She did not have time to think about their problems. She had her own battle to fight. The signal came to begin. Priya raised the rifle. At 50 meters, the faulty sight was an even bigger problem. The tiny misalignment that sent bullets 2 inches off at 10 meters could send them 5 or 6 inches off at this distance. Priya had to make larger adjustments, aiming even further to the right to compensate. But there was another problem she had not anticipated. The wind had picked up. It was coming from the left, pushing against the bullets as they flew. This meant she had to adjust for both the faulty sight and the wind. The calculations became more complex. She took her time with the first shot. She felt the wind on her face, estimated its speed, and adjusted her aim accordingly. Then she squeezed the trigger. The bullet hit just slightly off-center. It was still in the highest scoring zone, but it was not perfect. 9 points. Priya felt a flicker of disappointment, but she pushed it away. One imperfect shot did not mean defeat. She still had 19 more chances. The second shot was better, 10 points. The third shot, 10 points. She was finding her rhythm again. The adjustments were becoming automatic. She no longer had to think about the faulty sight or the wind. Her body was making the corrections on its own. By the 10th shot, she had scored 96 points. It was still an excellent score, but not perfect like before. She was in first place, but Rohit was close behind. He had improved in this round, hitting several perfect shots in a row. During the brief break at the halfway point, Priya noticed something strange. Coach Vikram was talking to one of the range officials. They were looking at her lane and pointing at something. The official looked uncomfortable, but Vikram kept talking insistently. Priya watched them with a growing sense of unease. What was Vikram planning now? She found out soon enough. When she returned to her lane for the second half of the round, the official approached her. "There has been a complaint," the official said. He looked embarrassed. "We need to inspect your equipment." "A complaint?" Priya repeated. "About what?" "About your rifle. Someone has suggested that it may not meet competition standards." Priya almost laughed. The rifle did not meet standards, but not in the way Vikram was suggesting. It was worse than standard, not better. But she knew arguing would be pointless. This was another attempt to throw her off balance, to break her concentration, to make her nervous. "Of course," she said calmly. "Please inspect it." The official took the rifle and examined it carefully. He looked through the sight, checked the barrel, tested the trigger. His frown deepened as he discovered the flaws that Priya had already found. The misaligned sight, the loose trigger, the slightly bent barrel. "This rifle is damaged," the official said, looking confused. "The sight is off. The trigger mechanism is loose. How have you been shooting such high scores with this?" From the corner of her eye, Priya saw Coach Vikram's face go white again. He had not expected this. He had thought the inspection would find illegal modifications that would disqualify her. Instead, it had found defects that proved she was even more skilled than her score suggested. "I make adjustments," Priya said simply. "In my mind. I calculate the errors and compensate for them." The official stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head in disbelief and handed the rifle back. "The rifle is legal," he announced. "The competition will continue." Vikram opened his mouth to protest. But another official stepped in and pulled him aside. There was a heated, whispered conversation. Vikram's face went from white to red again. Priya did not wait to see how it ended. She turned back to her lane and prepared for the remaining shots. The incident had changed the atmosphere at the range. Word spread quickly about the faulty rifle. Other competitors were looking at Priya with new eyes. Some looked impressed, others looked ashamed, as if they realized they had been part of something unfair. Mira, the reporter, was writing furiously in her notebook. Priya blocked it all out. She had 10 more shots to complete. The competition was not over yet. She raised the rifle and aimed at the target. Her arms were getting tired now. Her eyes were starting to burn, but she would not give up. She had come too far to stop now. The 11th shot, 10 points. The 12th shot, 9 points. 13th, 10 points. 14th, 10 points. 15th, 10 points. She was finding her rhythm again. Each shot was precise, calculated, perfect. 16th, 10 points. 17th, 10 points. 18th, 9 points. The wind had shifted, and she had not adjusted quickly enough, but she was still ahead. She just needed to finish strong. 19th shot. She took extra time with this one, feeling the wind, calculating the adjustment. She squeezed the trigger slowly, gently, exactly as she had practiced thousands of times. 10 points. 1 shot left. The entire range had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. This was the moment that would decide everything. Priya took a deep breath. She thought about her father, drinking tea in the early morning light. She thought about the abandoned shed where she had first learned to shoot. She thought about all the people who had doubted her, dismissed her, tried to stop her. She raised the rifle one last time. The target seemed very far away. The wind was pushing against her. Her arms were trembling with exhaustion, but her hands were steady. They were always steady. She aimed at the spot she had calculated, the spot that would compensate for all the flaws in the rifle and all the obstacles in her path. She held her breath. She squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out across the range. For a moment, everything was still. Then the scoreboard flashed. 10 points. The range erupted in applause. People were standing up, clapping, cheering. Competitors who had been ignoring her all day were now coming over to shake her hand. Priya lowered the rifle and closed her eyes. She had done it. Against all odds, with a sabotaged weapon, facing opposition at every turn, she had done it. Her final score was 386 out of 400 points. It was not a perfect score, but it was the highest in the competition by 12 points. She had won the state trials. She looked around for Coach Vikram. He was gone. Sometime during those last few shots, he had slipped away. She wondered what he was thinking. She wondered if he felt any shame for what he had tried to do. Rohit was still there, standing with his expensive rifle and his branded clothes. He had come in third place. His face was a mixture of anger and confusion. He could not understand how this had happened. He had everything, all the advantages, all the support, and he had still lost to a village girl with nothing. Priya walked over to him. Rohit tensed, expecting her to gloat, to mock him, to rub his face in his defeat. But Priya did not do any of those things. Instead, she held out her hand. "Good match," she said. "You shot well." Rohit stared at her hand. For a long moment he did not move. Then slowly he reached out and shook it. "How did you do it?" he asked. His voice was quiet, almost humble. "The rifle was terrible. I saw the official's report. How did you shoot so well with that thing?" Priya considered the question. She could have given him a clever answer. She could have talked about determination, hard work, natural talent. All of those things were true. But in the end, she gave him the simplest answer, the one that mattered most. "I had to," she said. "I had no other choice." Rohit did not understand. How could he? He had never been in a position where failure was not an option, where there was no safety net, no backup plan, no rich father to catch him if he fell. But maybe someday he would understand. Maybe this loss would teach him something that all his advantages never could. The victory ceremony was held that evening. Priya stood on the top of the podium, a gold medal around her neck. The national anthem played over the speakers. Photographers took her picture. And somewhere in the crowd, watching on a small television screen in a tea shop near the sports complex, Priya's father wiped tears from his eyes and smiled. But the story was far from over. The state trials were just the beginning. The national championships were 3 months away, and there were people who would do anything to make sure Priya Malik never got there. As she stepped down from the podium, a man in an expensive suit approached her. He had cold eyes and a politician's smile. "Congratulations," he said. "You must be very proud." "Thank you," Priya said cautiously. "I am Shekhar Mehra," the man said. "Rohit's father." Priya felt her stomach tighten. She had heard about Shekhar Mehra. He was a powerful man with connections in the state government, the sports ministry, and the business world. People said he always got what he wanted, one way or another. "Your son shot very well," Priya said politely. "He has a bright future." Shekhar's smile did not change, but his eyes grew colder. "Yes, he does. And I intend to make sure nothing stands in the way of that future." He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You have won today," he said. But winning is not just about shooting well. It is about having the right support, the right connections, the right resources. You have none of these things. The national championships are in Delhi. Do you have the money to get there? To stay there? To train properly for the next 3 months? Priya did not answer. She did not need to. They both knew the truth. Shekhar straightened up and smiled again, the public smile that meant nothing. "Think about it," he said. "I am not your enemy. I could be your friend. The right kind of friend could open many doors for you." He walked away, leaving Priya standing alone with her gold medal and her fears. She knew what he was offering. He would support her career if she agreed to let his son win at the Nationals. He would give her money, training, equipment, everything she needed. All she had to do was lose on purpose. It was a tempting offer. Part of her, the tired part, the practical part, wanted to accept. What was one competition compared to a lifetime of support? What was one gold medal compared to a career? But another part of her, the part that had learned to shoot in an abandoned shed, the part that had endured years of mockery and discrimination, the part that had just beaten a sabotaged rifle through sheer will and skill, that part refused to even consider it. She was Priya Malik. She had gotten here on her own terms, and she would go to the Nationals on her own terms too, whatever that meant, whatever it cost. She looked down at the gold medal in her hands. It was small and simple, nothing like the fancy trophies she had seen other athletes receive, but it was hers. She had earned it. And nobody, not Coach Vikram, not Rohit, not Shekhar Mehra with all his power and money, could take that away from her. The next 3 months would be the hardest of her life. She knew that. But she was not afraid. She had faced hard things before, and she had always found a way through. The 3 months between the state trials and the national championships were unlike anything Priya had experienced before. She returned to her village as a local hero. People who had once whispered about her wasting time now stopped her on the streets to take photographs. The same aunties who had criticized her for not learning to cook now told their daughters to be more like Priya Malik. But fame did not pay for training. It did not buy ammunition. It did not cover the cost of travel to Delhi for the national championships. Priya's father sold one of his 3 acres of land to fund her training. When Priya found out, she cried for the first time in years. That land had been in their family for 3 generations. Her father had worked it since he was a boy. "It is just dirt," her father said, wiping her tears. "You are worth more than dirt." The money from the land sale was enough to cover basic expenses, but not enough for proper coaching. Coach Vikram had been suspended pending an investigation into the faulty rifle incident, but even if he had been available, Priya would never have trained with him again. She needed a new coach, someone who would help her genuinely, someone she could trust. She found that person in the most unexpected place. His name was Major Arvind Singh, retired. He was 73 years old and had been a shooter in the Indian Army 50 years ago. He had won medals in competitions that most people had never heard of, in a time when shooting sports received almost no attention in India. Priya learned about him from Mehra, the reporter who had interviewed her at the state trials. Mehra had written a long article about Priya's story, including the sabotage attempt with the faulty rifle. The article had caused a small sensation. Many people had reached out to offer support. Most of the offers were not serious, but Major Arvind's was different. He sent a handwritten letter to Priya's village address. The handwriting was shaky but clear. The letter was brief and direct. "I watched you shoot on television," he wrote. "I have never seen anyone handle a faulty weapon the way you did. You have natural talent. But talent alone will not win at the national level. You need training, real training. I can help if you are willing to work harder than you have ever worked before." There was no mention of money. No conditions, no expectations. Just an offer of help from one shooter to another. Priya traveled to Major Arvind's home in a small town near Chandigarh. She was nervous about meeting him. She had heard stories about army officers being strict and harsh. She expected him to be cold and demanding. What she found was an old man sitting in a wheelchair in a garden full of roses. His legs had been injured in a training accident 40 years ago, ending his competitive career. But his eyes were sharp and alert, and when he looked at Priya, she felt like he could see straight into her soul. "Show me how you shoot," he said, without any greeting or small talk. There was a small range behind his house, just 15 meters long. Priya took her old rifle out of its case and fired 10 shots. All 10 hit the center. Major Arvind nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "Now do it again with your eyes closed." Priya stared at him. "With my eyes closed?" "A truly great shooter does not need to see the target," Major Arvind said. "They feel it. They know where it is without looking. This is what separates good shooters from champions." For the next 2 months, Priya lived in Major Arvind's house and trained every day from sunrise to sunset. She learned things she had never imagined. She learned to control her heartbeat through meditation. She learned to sense wind changes through the feel of air on her skin. She learned to shoot in the dark, in the rain, in conditions that would break most competitors. Major Arvind was a hard teacher. He accepted no excuses. He demanded perfection in everything, not just shooting, but eating, sleeping, breathing. Everything had to be disciplined. Everything had to serve the single goal of becoming the best. But he was also kind. In the evenings, after training was done, he would tell Priya stories about the old days. He would show her photographs of competitions and teammates long dead. He would share the wisdom he had gathered over 7 decades of living. "The rifle is not a weapon," he told her one evening. "It is an extension of yourself. When you shoot, you are not sending a bullet to a target. You are sending a part of your own spirit. The bullet goes where your spirit tells it to go." Priya did not fully understand this at first, but as the weeks passed, she began to feel what he meant. The rifle became less of a separate object and more of a part of her own body. When she raised it to shoot, she no longer had to think about aim and trigger and sight. She simply knew where the bullet would go. During this time, she learned more about the forces working against her. Shekhar Mehra had not given up on his plan to ensure Rohit's victory. He had used his connections in the sports ministry to create problems for Priya. First, there were issues with her registration for the national championships. Papers went missing, forms were rejected for minor errors, deadlines were extended for other competitors, but enforced strictly against her. Each obstacle required days of effort to overcome, days that should have been spent training. Then there were the rumors. Stories began circulating that Priya had cheated at the state trials, that her rifle had actually been enhanced, not damaged, that the whole investigation had been a cover-up. None of it was true, but the rumors spread anyway, poisoning minds against her before she even arrived in Delhi. Meera warned Priya about all of this. The reporter had become something like a friend over the past months. She was working on a longer investigation into Shekhar Mehra's influence in sports, but it was slow going. The man had powerful protectors. "Be careful in Delhi," Meera told her over the phone a week before the championships. "Mehra has people everywhere. They will try to rattle you, distract you, make you lose focus. Whatever they do, do not react. That is what they want." Priya thanked her for the warning and returned to her training. She had 1 week left to prepare, and she intended to use every minute. Major Arvind gave her one final lesson on the day before she left for Delhi. "I have taught you everything I know about shooting," he said. "But there is one thing I cannot teach you. It is something you must find within yourself." "What is that?" Priya asked. Major Arvind smiled. It was a rare thing, that smile. It made him look young again, like the soldier he had been 50 years ago. "The will to win," he said. "Not the desire. Everyone desires to win. But the will, the absolute determination that accepts no other outcome, that is different. You must find that will within yourself. And when you do, nothing in the world can stop you." Priya arrived in Delhi 2 days before the championships. The city was overwhelming. She had never seen so many people, so many cars, so many buildings. Her village seemed like a different planet compared to this place. She stayed in a cheap hotel near the stadium. It was all she could afford. Other competitors stayed in fancy hotels with their coaches and support teams. Priya had only herself. The first day of competition was for practice and registration. Priya went through the process quietly, trying not to attract attention. But attention found her anyway. Rohit was there, surrounded by reporters and coaches and assistants. When he saw Priya, something flickered in his eyes. It might have been fear. It might have been anger. She could not tell. His father was there too. Shekhar Mehra watched Priya from across the registration hall. He did not approach her or speak to her. He just watched, with those cold politician's eyes, like a snake watching a mouse. Priya ignored him. She completed her registration and went to inspect the competition range. The range was nothing like what she was used to. It was indoors, climate-controlled, with electronic targets and scoring systems. The lighting was artificial and bright. The air smelled of metal and cleaning chemicals. She walked along the lanes, studying each position. She tested the airflow from the ventilation system, noting where it might affect bullet trajectory. She observed the angle of the lights, checking for glare that might interfere with aiming. She was so focused on her inspection that she did not notice the two men approaching her until they were right beside her. They were large men in plain clothes, with blank expressions and hard eyes. Security guards, maybe. Or something else. "You are Priya Malik?" one of them asked. "Yes," she said carefully. "Someone wants to speak with you. Please come with us." Priya felt fear rising in her chest, but she did not show it. "Who wants to speak with me?" "A friend. Someone who can help you." She knew who they meant. Shekhar Mehra was making his move. "I do not need help," she said, "and I am busy preparing for tomorrow." The men did not move. They stood on either side of her, blocking her path. "It was not a request," one of them said quietly. "Please come with us. Do not make a scene." Priya looked around. There were other people in the range, but they were far away, focused on their own preparations. Nobody was paying attention to what was happening here. She thought about screaming. She thought about running. But she did neither of those things. Instead, she thought about what Major Arvind had taught her. Discipline, control, never let your opponent see your fear. "Fine," she said. "Take me to him." The men led her to a private room at the back of the stadium complex. It was a lounge of some kind with comfortable furniture and expensive decorations. Shekhar Mehra was sitting on a leather couch, drinking tea from a fine china cup. "Ah, Priya," he said, as if they were old friends. "Please, sit down, have some tea." "I prefer to stand," Priya said. "What do you want?" Shekhar's smile faltered slightly. He was not used to being spoken to so directly. "I want to make you an offer," he said. "A generous offer. As I told you at the state trials, I am not your enemy. I can be very helpful to people who cooperate with me." "You mean people who lose on purpose so your son can win?" The smile disappeared completely. "I see we can skip the pleasantries." "Yes, that is exactly what I mean." He stood up and walked toward her. He was taller than she had realized, and his presence was intimidating. "Listen carefully," he said. "Tomorrow's competition will have 3 rounds. You can win the first 2 rounds. Show everyone how good you are. Get all the glory you want. But in the final round, you will make mistakes. Just enough mistakes to lose. Rohit will win by a narrow margin. Everyone will say it was a close competition. Nobody will suspect anything. And if I refuse?" Shekhar's face hardened. "Then I will destroy you, not physically. I am not a thug, but I have influence in places you cannot imagine. Your registration can be canceled for technical reasons. Your scores can be invalidated for suspected cheating. Your career can be ended before it even begins." He paused to let his words sink in. "I am offering you a choice," he continued. "Cooperation and success, or defiance and ruin. Which do you prefer?" Priya looked at him. She looked at the expensive room, the security guards, all the symbols of his power. She thought about everything she had sacrificed to get here. Her father's land, her own sweat and tears, the years of struggle and hardship, and she thought about Major Arvin's final lesson, the will to win. The absolute determination that accepts no other outcome. "I choose defiance," she said. Shekhar stared at her. "You are making a mistake." "Maybe," Priya said, "but it is my mistake to make, and I would rather fail on my own terms than succeed on yours." She turned and walked toward the door. The security guards moved to block her, but Shekhar raised his hand and stopped them. "Let her go," he said quietly. "She will regret this." Priya walked out of the room and did not look back. That night, she could not sleep. She lay in her cheap hotel room, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had just destroyed her own future. Shekhar Mehra was powerful. He could do everything he had threatened and more. But when morning came, she got up, ate her simple breakfast, and went to the stadium. Whatever happened today, she would face it with her head held high. The competition began at 9 in the morning. There were 40 competitors from all over India, the best shooters in the country, all fighting for one national championship. The first round was at 10 meters. Priya shot with perfect calm, hitting the center with every shot. Her score was flawless. She finished first in the round, ahead of Rohit by 3 points. The second round was at 25 meters. This time she felt the pressure more keenly. She knew Shekhar was watching, waiting for her to give in. She knew his people were looking for any excuse to disqualify her. But she also knew that she was better than this. Better than the fear. Better than the doubt. She shot with the same precision as before, compensating for every variable, adjusting for every imperfection. Her score was nearly perfect. She finished the round in first place again. Now came the final round, 50 meters. The round where Shekhar expected her to fail. As she took her position at the shooting lane, she noticed something strange. The rifle felt different. The balance was off. The weight was wrong. Her heart went cold. She looked down at the rifle in her hands. It was not her rifle. Someone had switched it while she was not looking. This rifle, like the one Coach Vikram had given her at the state trials, was faulty. She looked up and saw Shekhar Mehra standing at the edge of the range. He was smiling, that cold, confident smile that said he had already won. Priya felt panic rising in her chest. She had only a few minutes before the round began. There was no time to find her real rifle, no time to prove what had happened. No time to do anything. And then she remembered. She had done this before. At the state trials, she had been given a faulty rifle, and she had overcome it. She had learned every flaw, calculated every adjustment, and shot perfect scores anyway. She could do it again. In the few minutes remaining, she examined the new rifle with frantic speed. She tested the sight, checked the trigger, felt the barrel. It was flawed, just like before. But the flaws were different this time. The sight was tilted the other way. The trigger was too tight instead of too loose. She mapped the flaws in her mind. She calculated the adjustments she would need to make. It was not perfect preparation. It was rushed and incomplete. But it was something. The signal came to begin the round. 20 shots at 50 meters. The round that would decide everything. Priya raised the rifle. The first shot went wide, 8 points instead of 10. She had not adjusted enough for the sight. The second shot was better, 9 points. She was learning the rifle as she shot, adjusting in real time, using everything Major Arvind had taught her. Third shot, 10 points. Fourth shot, 10 points. Fifth shot, 10 points. She was finding her rhythm. The panic was fading. The fear was turning into focus. Shot after shot, she adapted to the faulty rifle. She was not shooting as well as she had in the earlier rounds, but she was shooting well enough. She was staying in the competition. By the 15th shot, she had narrowed the gap. Rohit was shooting well, but not perfectly. He was feeling the pressure, too. Every time he looked at the scoreboard and saw Priya still competing, his confidence wavered. The 16th shot, 10 points. 17th, 10 points. 18th, 9 points. The wind from the ventilation system had shifted, and she had not compensated quickly enough. 19th shot. She took her time with this one, feeling the rifle, feeling the air, feeling everything. 10 points, 1 shot left. The scores were almost tied. This shot would decide the national championship. Priya looked down at the faulty rifle in her hands. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The abandoned shed, the rusty air rifle, her father's sacrifice, Major Arvind's lessons, the sabotage, the threats, the obstacles. She thought about Shekhar Mehra standing somewhere behind her, waiting for her to fail. And she thought about the will to win, the absolute determination that accepts no other outcome. She raised the rifle one last time. She aimed at the target, adjusting for every flaw she had discovered, compensating for every imperfection. The world fell silent. Her finger touched the trigger. She squeezed. The shot rang out across the range. The scoreboard flashed. 10 points. Priya lowered the rifle and closed her eyes. The sounds of the world came rushing back. Applause, cheering, her name being called over the loudspeakers. She had won. Against all odds, with a sabotaged weapon, facing threats and corruption at every turn, she had won the national championship. She opened her eyes and looked for Shekhar Mehra. He was still standing at the edge of the range, but his smile was gone. His face was pale, his hands were shaking. As she watched, 2 officials approached him. They were accompanied by police officers. Mira, the reporter, was with them, holding a stack of documents. Priya learned later what had happened. Mira's investigation had finally paid off. She had found evidence of Shekhar's attempts to sabotage the competition, including testimony from the person he had paid to switch the rifles. The officials had been waiting to make their move, and Shekhar's reaction to Priya's victory had provided the final confirmation they needed. Shekhar Mehra was arrested that day. His political connections could not save him this time. The scandal was too public, the evidence too clear. Rohit watched his father being led away. His face was a mixture of shock and shame. Everything he thought he knew about his life was crumbling around him. Priya walked over to him. She did not know why. She just felt like she should. "I am sorry," she said, "about your father." Rohit looked at her. His eyes were wet with tears he was trying not to shed. "Why are you sorry?" he asked. "After everything he did to you?" Priya thought about the question. She thought about all the anger and resentment she had felt over the past months. She thought about how easy it would be to hate this boy and his family. But hatred was heavy. It weighed you down. It made you slower, weaker, less than you could be. "Because holding on to anger does not help anyone," she said. "I would rather let it go and move forward." She held out her hand. Rohit looked at it for a long moment. Then he reached out and shook it. The victory ceremony was held that evening. Priya stood on the top of the podium, a gold medal around her neck, the national anthem playing over the speakers. Thousands of people were watching, both in the stadium and on television screens across the country. In her village, her father was watching with tears streaming down his face. The same neighbors who had once mocked his daughter were now cheering and celebrating, proud to claim any connection to the national champion. In Chandigarh, Major Arvind was watching from his wheelchair in his garden of roses. He smiled that rare smile and nodded slowly, as if he had known all along that this would happen. And in Delhi, standing on that podium, Priya Malik looked out at the crowd and thought about the journey that had brought her here. The obstacles, the setbacks, the moments when giving up seemed like the only option. She had not given up. She had kept going. And now she was here. She touched the gold medal hanging from her neck. It was small and simple, just like the one she had won at the state trials. but it represented something much larger than itself. It represented the truth that talent and hard work could overcome corruption and power, that a village girl with nothing but determination could beat a system designed to keep her down, that the will to win, the absolute determination that accepts no other outcome, was the most powerful force in the world. Priya smiled. She had proven them all wrong, and this was just the beginning. In the years that followed, Priya Malik would go on to win many more championships. She would represent India at international competitions. She would inspire a generation of young women to pursue their dreams, no matter how impossible those dreams seemed. But she never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the abandoned shed where she had first learned to shoot. She never forgot her father's sacrifice, or Major Arvind's lessons, or the faulty rifles that had tested her skill and determination, and she never forgot the most important lesson of all. The bullet goes where your spirit tells it to go. Her spirit had told it to go to the center, and it had listened.